Hi, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Our mission here at Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live well in spite of your mental health challenge by sharing insights through interviews, practical tools for living well, encouragement, and courage for overcoming all from a Christian perspective. And now, here's your host, Pastor Brad Hoefs.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Brad Hoefs, your host. Our purpose here on Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live a faith-filled, rich, and full life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis, or in spite of the fact that you might love someone with a mental health diagnosis. I'm sure glad you joined me today for this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. We're going to talk about something very simple, but it's so simple that it's profound, if you will. I want to talk to you today about 5 questions that you need to ask yourself when you're having a tough or bad day. 5 questions, 5 simple questions, but I would encourage you, if you're having a tough day sometime, and we all do, you're having a difficult day sometime, and we all do, for you to sit down and ask yourself these 5 questions. In fact, I would encourage you during this podcast, or maybe you'll be able to pick it up from the notes that are along with this podcast, for you to really think about sitting down with these questions, having them written out ahead of time. So take notes today. In other words, write these 5 things down as you're listening to this podcast. And as you do that, place those questions in maybe your journal or put them someplace where you're going to remember that they are. And when you're having that bad day, I want you to come or find the 5 questions and sit down and answer them. I think it could even be more beneficial to you if you sat down and you wrote out your answer. So let's start with question number 1. So these are 5 questions you ask yourself when you're having a hard day. First question to ask yourself: what do I need right now? What is it that I need right now? I think many times when something causes us to have a bad day, it's usually situations or surprises or things that happen that cause us to kind of freak out emotionally. We get overloaded and we can't think, all we can think of is how terrible what's happened, or how terrible I feel, and we get just kind of whacked out about it. And sometimes you just got to figure out what to do next. What do you need right now? Sometimes that's just somebody to listen to you. Sometimes it means just sitting quiet. Sometimes it means not thinking about it. Sometimes it means whatever it might mean. But to ask yourself that question first and foremost. Secondly, ask yourself right away. Secondly, ask yourself, what does this situation potentially want to teach me? Now that seems crazy, but that question in and of itself will help you focus on the what can God do with this in spite of why God. Sometimes when we get tied up into that why God, we can't get ourselves out of it. Quite honestly, it feeds rumination. And this question, by the very nature of the question, it helps you refocus right away and get your focus on what can God do through this circumstance. What is He teaching me? What is He showing me? Where and how is He possibly going to have a silver lining for me through this? Third question: what am I being asked to let go of? Oh, that's a really difficult one, isn't it? Sometimes it's letting go of control. Sometimes it might be letting go of a desire or a dream. Sometimes it can be letting go of a loved one. It's important to know sometimes that we can't control everything. And so if it's something we can't control, we've got to let go of even our desire to control it. And that question helps us with, what am I being asked to let go of? Number 4, how can I grow through this? How can I evolve through this? I used to say, if life kicks you, make sure you're headed in the direction you want it to go. In other words, if somebody's going to come, if life's going to come behind you and kick you, make sure you're already facing the direction you want to go. In other words, how can I grow from this? How can I evolve? One way to do that is to decide you aren't going to overreact like maybe you usually overreact. Many times, many of us don't have the correct tools, or we're not shown the right ways of handling emotional turmoil, if you will. And so the ability to regulate our emotions through difficult times and difficult days proves to be very difficult. And so what we do is we go on this emotional roller coaster based upon all of our circumstances that are going on around us. Maybe this time how you evolve is you don't overreact emotionally, that you begin to regulate your emotions even through and on a difficult day. And then number 5, how can I show myself some love? How can I show myself some TLC? How can I show myself some self-care through this? 5 simple questions that will help you with focusing you, refocusing you, reframing the situation. Instead of saying, oh, I'm having a horrible, terrible, no good, very bad day, and repeating that over and over and over and over. Or I'm in the middle of a horrible, terrible, no good, very bad situation, or I did a horrible, terrible, no good, very bad thing. Oh. And then you focus on it. That does not solve it. In fact, it can make it much worse. So asking yourself these 5 simple questions. What do I do right now? What does this situation want to teach me? What am I being asked to let go of? How can I grow or evolve? How can I show myself love? Well, my friend, that's it for this edition. It's short and sweet, I guess, but sometimes short and sweet is important. And I hope these 5 questions have been helpful to you, and I promise they will help you in the future when you're having a bad day. Keep them safely tucked away somewhere. And when that day comes or that situation comes, pull them out and ask yourself these 5 questions. I'd really love to hear from you. You can email me at pastorbrad@freshhope.us, pastorbrad@freshhope.us. You can email me comments, questions, insights, additional thoughts, all kinds of things, and even give me some critical feedback. I love to hear feedback and how we can help you better. You can connect with us on social media and all the usual places, as well as, would you mind doing me a favor? If you've listened to this podcast through the iTunes platform, simply write an honest review of this podcast, of this edition of the podcast, and it will help others find it in their algorithms. And so that's just a really helpful thing to do. We have books and resources, tons of them available. You can find those through our website in our store, as well as we have groups throughout the United States and in, I think, about 14 other countries now. We have groups in English and Spanish, resources in English and Spanish. Another thing that you could do to help us out is be sure to tell your friends about this podcast. Until next time, may the Lord hold you and fill you with His hope, fresh and new daily. I'm Brad Hoefs, and this has been another edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health.
You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. If you have an opportunity, please review, share, and subscribe to the Fresh Hope for Mental Health podcast on iTunes or on the service that you use. We encourage you to share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. Previous podcasts of Fresh Hope for Mental Health can be found at freshhopeformentalhealth.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and iTunes. Fresh Hope is one of the leading networks of faith-based peer support groups internationally. For more information about Fresh Hope, go to freshhope.us.